Hi, everyone. Welcome to the FMCG, guys. I'm Daniel Torres. Hello, Christina Nicolau. How are you?
Hi, Daniel. Hello from a very hot Athens. And the refreshing FMCG guys episode is just what we need right now.
Indeed. Very excited about today's guest, Kristof Neirynck, CMO of Avon. Been wanting him on the show for quite some time, but we wanted to give him time to get into his new role at Avon, make a difference, and tell us all about it. So excited to have him here. What do you think, Christine?
Absolutely exciting. His title is very impressive, and so is his experience. Having gone through his profile as well, I see that he's a fellow PNGer, but he's had a very interesting journey. So I'm very keen to see how he has evolved in his career and where he sees Avon right now.
Yeah, I won't know where to start because he brings, as you said, a huge amount of experience in both FMCG and retail in the marketing side and in general management. And I'm also, of course, very keen to understand how he's turning around Avon to bring it back to its heyday when it was the biggest cosmetics company in the world. So I think we're going to leave the conversation excited, no?
Absolutely. And from a consumer point of view, I'm very familiar with Avon as it's kind of like a legacy company, right, within the beauty industry. And it's also very well known for the sales reps model.
Exactly.
So I'm really interested to see how is this evolving? Is it still relevant nowadays? How are they transforming themselves? So very keen to jump into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you haven't reached the show via LinkedIn, make sure you visit our page there. We'll leave it on the show notes. We're on a weekly, actually daily basis, sharing content from educational videos about the industry, news, updates, and more. So, and also if you're regular on the show, please take the time to leave us a review on whatever podcast player you're listening us on. So, without further ado, here's our conversation with Kristof. Enjoy.
Hi, I'm Kristof Neirynck. I'm the CMO at Avon.
Hey, Kristof. Thanks for introducing yourself and thanks for joining us in this Wednesday evening. So the audience gets a bit acquainted with you. What is your current scope as Avon CMO? What does that entail?
Yeah, well, I mean, so the CMO at Avon has kind of two main responsibilities. One is what you would typically see in a marketing job. So, product development, advertising development, media, consumer insights, that kind of stuff, which you would find in a regular CPG. And then the second part of my role is more, because we are a B2B to C channel, we're a retailer, if you want, a direct selling, as well as a brands business. So the second part of my role links more with the fact that we're also a retailer, and we have these amazing, Avon brochures, which are, 200 and something pages of loveliness.
Wow.
But that's in the end like a store, and we need to merchandise the store. So we need to decide, which products go where, what promotions do we run, how much space we give them. So very much like when you're a retailer and you need to decide which products you put where in the store, how much space do you give them, which promotions you run. So it's quite, I call it more like it's like a trading job, a trading director in a retailer or a merchandising director in a retailer, and what they would be doing. So that's kind of the two big parts of the role: the regular CPG marketeer bit, and then almost the bit that more, and they call it actually commercial marketing in Avon. That's actually more the kind of trading part of the job. So it's quite commercial as well.
Yeah, and it sounds very retail. No, it sounds like closer to like the merchandising function, for example, in retail. No.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and it's trade marketing as well as then also we need to recruit new representatives, so that's kind of also part of the job. And that's part actually I forgot to mention. On top of CMO, I'm also managing director for Western Europe. So there, for Western Europe, I run the whole P&L across a number of countries. But that's I guess the second part. I have three jobs then, if you want to plug it.
And this is very interesting, right? Because your work extends beyond the pure brand marketing, let's say, and the consumer part, what people usually have in mind when they hear about marketing. And I saw that you actually graduated from P&G, ex-P&G are here as well. And given, people usually refer to P&G as a really big school, and having done marketing there, how do you think that this has shaped you in the way that you now run the business in Avon?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely helped, because in the sense that I'm an electronics engineer from education, so I never had any course in marketing whatsoever. And I hope I'm now an okay marketeer. But the P&G, they always, and there's a few others as well that they call, marketing universities. And that's definitely helped. And what I would say though, P&G taught me all of the kind of core brand building skill, and also marketing at P&G is far bigger than what marketing sometimes is in other companies, because in other companies, not disrespectfully, but marketing is the pretty pictures department. In P&G, you actually run the P&L as a marketeer. So you're a brand director or a brand manager, and you actually, you get quite deeply into the numbers, and you run the whole thing. The 5 Ps, if you want. Whilst in other companies, it's often more restricted to communication, and I think that's what makes, I think, P&G such a good school for more, I guess, also generalist marketeers who are then ready to go into more, general manager and what you have kind of roles where brand maybe plays a core role to that company, but because P&G is such a great learning school to also get more business understanding, I think that's probably the strongest bit that P&G brought to my arsenal, if you want.
Yeah, 100% with you.
And then you decided to leave. Like, you're obviously very successful at P&G. You did consumer side, the old luxury side, which does not exist anymore. And then after like 13 plus years there, you leave to go to Walgreens Boots Alliance, which, apart from like the nature of the business and the categories, obviously has a very different culture, majority owned by one person, very different culture. Why did you decide to leave Procter, and how was it to adapt to a quite different environment?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, P&G, I would say, if I look at my career, the first 10 years, which were almost equally split between, the lovely world of, tampons and sanitary towels, which was my first 5 years, to then do 5 years of laundry. That's where I really learned, the hardcore kind of brand building skills, etc., and call it first 10 years like, engineer becomes marketeer, I guess. The second stint actually at P&G was I consciously went into something where I would learn something radically different. A lot of P&Gers shied away from the prestige division. First of all, because there was always a rumor that it was going to be sold. And secondly, because it's not core business for P&G. It's very, very different. And then also when you work with a fashion house, you don't decide many things yourself anymore. It's all about influence and skills and all of those things. And that's where I would say, for me, it was a masterclass in how to influence an Italian fashion house to do exactly the things that they did not necessarily immediately thought of. Like, initially we had in our business plan that was signed off way too many department stores where you can't make money. So how do you convince the Gucci CEO, which really wants department stores because that builds the brand equity, that he should go into more Sephora's rather than going into more department stores? And having those conversations where you can't tell them what to do because ultimately you're dependent on convincing them, finding a win-win for both. Because of course, if you just fold over, that's not good for P&G, and equally the other way is not going to work because they're just going to block. And so for me, it was a real masterclass in building win-wins and not lowest common denominator. But then, why did I leave P&G? It's because of two reasons. One was, they did ask me to come back into what they would call at the time core business when the transaction was about to go through. But my partner was moving to London, and I felt I kind of did that So I wanted to learn a completely different side of things and, kind of sharpen, I would say, my commercial saw, because I had run P&Ls from Geneva, I was only 2 years in a local marketing job in Belgium, and then the rest of my P&G career, about 11 years, I spent in Geneva, more at headquarter level, where it was about running global P&Ls. And so yeah, that was kind of the trigger. There was Coty buying out P&G Prestige. And so for me, I had a choice. Do I go back to stuff I've felt I kind of done? Yes, I could do some different products, etc. Or do I go for a new learning experience and a new challenge? And for me, I kind of need a new big hairy challenge every 5 years. And so that's where then WBA came along with an interesting challenge, actually, because for them, they had a brand, number 7, that was big in one market in the UK, in Boots, in one retailer. So one brand, one country, one retailer, pretty much. I mean, there was a bit of business outside, but very small. With the challenge of how do we build a CPG business from within a retailer, sell to our own retail partners, Boots and Walgreens, but also sell to our competitors, to Target, Ulta, and sell not only in the UK, but, venture into the US, venture into China. I kind of selected that those would be kind of key priority markets based on, kind of where do we think the opportunities are. But it was, a completely different experience, and running a P&L hands-on from within a retailer, because P&G kind of stops at marketing, stops at you hand it over to the local teams or the retailer teams to then take it from there. Here, your retailer and brands business, and that made an enormous opportunity to truly own the end-to-end of a brand. And so, and the commercial side of that as well really attracted me. So that's kind of why I moved. I felt it was a very complementary experience to the hardcore P&G marketing skill sets I had learned at global P&G, if you want.
And it feels like a very intriguing journey, right? So if I hear you correctly, it's engineer learning marketing, then the marketeer getting into commercial, and with all that venturing you mentioned, it's borderline entrepreneurial side of things.
It is, because it's kind of, we basically then acquired a number of brands. We acquired Les Earl, ironically from Avon at the time, then where I'm now. But anyway, so they acquired Les Earl, Sleek Makeup, Soap and Glory. So to kind of build that portfolio and then rolling out into other markets. The second thing, which for me was really interesting, beyond building that CPG business from within a massive retailer. I mean, I don't know what their sales are now, but at the time it was $140 billion company, and building kind of a startup, beauty business from within that was super exciting. Clearly, number 7 was quite big, but everything else was kind of startup brands. So that was super exciting. But I would say the second bit, which for me, I think P&G at the time, I don't know where they are now. I left them in 2015. The bit that you have when you're part of a retailer is that at least at Walgreens and Boots, you have a loyalty card. And basically you have the Boots Balance Reward card and the Boots Ad card and the Walgreens Balance Reward. Combined, they have 100, at the time, I don't know how many they have now, but at the time they had 120 million first-party data records. And I'm talking 2018, 2019. Any CPG brand could just dream of having access to that 120 million data records of purchase history, demographic information, all of that stuff, because then, of course, third-party cookies starts going away, and kind of clearly iPhone gets quite privacy conscious, or Apple as a whole. So as a result, if you don't have your own first-party data, you're kind of struggling as a marketeer. And that's what I think was really interesting, to be in a retailer that has that level of first-party data records, and how you can then, fuel your brand through that, through a number of use cases, was absolutely fascinating and transformational for that brand's business.
Yeah, and I think you've gone through a lot of things on when it comes to role you were having in all that, but also it's kind of a big cultural shift, as Daniel was mentioning before, from one environment to another. And all this also while you're climbing up the ladder, right? So I'm wondering, from a leadership perspective, joining a new culture and having to manage this new role while also leading an organization, how do you manage that? What was your approach?
Yeah, and luckily, and actually, I always had the same thing. P&G had this strengths framework, which I'm sure you're familiar with, Christine. But I never had leadership, by the way, never, which I've always was very sad about. But basically, my managers always said, you have 3 hallmarks, and yes, you're great at leadership, but there's 3 that you're even better at. And so they were collaboration. Interestingly, I think it's probably one of the most underrated leadership skills. So collaboration. Second one was, they call it thinks and acts decisively, which is basically strategic thinking, and operates with discipline, i.e. making stuff happen. And so for me, it's the first thing, it's that collaboration, and it's underpinned by, actually a boss once let me read. I said, look, I'm not this kind of loud, kind of very, charismatic leader or any of that stuff. So how do you get an organization to follow you?
You're not that bad either, right?
I don't know. I talk a lot, but anyways. So it was interesting, and so he let me read. He had to force me a while. In the end, he copied it from the book and gave me the printout, the copies to read. From Jim Collins, From Good to Great. He only copied one chapter, which is the Level 5 Leader, and I really recognize myself in that, which is, it talks about humble leadership. It talks about respecting the past. So when you come into a business. And yes, there's always challenges. An organization might not necessarily have all of the brand building skills. If you think about, the organization I found at Walgreens Boots. So we had to build brand building skills. In other organizations, you might not have the digital skills. In some organizations, you might need to do a complete portfolio reset. But again, all of the businesses I've worked at, have been successful business at some point in time, or were still successful. So when you come in, you need to, first of all, respect what's there and respect what's been done. If you come in all guns blazing and you're kind of saying I'm the person who's going to tell you how to do it, I think you're dead in the water in a way. So I think landing in a business with humble leadership and, clearly sheer determination to make stuff happen, because that's what Jim Collins says. It's not just good that you're listening and kind of integrating other people's point of view to get to the best win-win, but at the same time, a sheer determination to make the vision happen. And for me, it's kind of, that's the important bit, is inspiring people with a simple vision that people can get on board with. They say, oh, yes, we want to be that world-class CPG business. Yes, we want to go there. And then, a few simple strategic bits that people, not complicated strategies, because if it's too complicated, people get lost. So very kitchen logic, as I call it, very kitchen logic kind of, these are the 3 things we're going to do. And then you just throw everything at it. But be humble along the way. I think, honestly, that's for me. Yes, cultures are different, but people are still people, and hence going into that with humbleness, listening, truly believing, and not just acting that every point of view is valued to get to the strongest possible outcome. Because sometimes you have different cultures, right? I still remember one of the first meetings I had. I think I was one day in the business, somebody showed me something at WBA and yeah, here you go, what do you think? And I thought, I just threw out what I thought. And then 2 weeks later, the person comes back, it's done. I said, what's done? Well, what you told us. I said, yeah, but I was a day in the business. What do I know? What's the right thing to do? But, there's a cultural sensitivity there where, some organizations have a stronger contest culture where people will actively, and that's one of the journeys I had to take my leadership team on. I said, look, there's plenty of ideas. but all of them might be rubbish. So please challenge me. You know, there's this one quote from Colin Powell. Not that Colin Powell is the most inspirational person in the world, but he had one really good quote. And he talked about loyalty, which is maybe the wrong word. But anyways, he says, loyalty in the room means that you will tell me the truth and what you really think, whether you think I'm going to like it or not. Loyalty out of the room means that you will carry the decision, whatever that decision is, as your own, even if you originally disagreed. And I think for me, that is a really important principle where you create the psychological safety for people to challenge ideas, to build on ideas. And ultimately then wherever you land, everybody holds the line and goes out and executes, rather than when it then goes wrong saying, I told them this way. No, you own it. And there's a few important principles for me there. I said, not the most inspirational person, Colin Powell, but I think he had one good quote.
No, and it's practical because there's also assures that you break circles of silence, that people feel like they're being listened. You empower them to come up with ideas. Unfortunately, this is not the reality of the majority of workplaces, I would dare to say. But hopefully people can learn from podcasts like this.
But it takes courage to do that. I mean, I still remember.
No, it does.
I had a new HR person who came into my team from another part of the business. And so basically, the person had been at Boots for a long, long time. And you know, in my leadership team, I really led with that behavior, where people could just tell me, well, that's stupid. Okay, fine, tell me why. And then after the meeting, the HR person came to me and said, like, oh my God, I can't believe how disrespectful they are to you. I said, well, what do you mean? Well, they just told you that your ideas are rubbish. I said, yes, but they were right. So it's really important to kind of, it's surprising sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's important that you hold the line. Because I do genuinely believe that's how you get the strongest possible outcomes.
Yeah, and you get people to disagree and commit.
Absolutely.
No, absolutely. I think that disagreement is healthy, right? If it's channeled in the right way.
Yes, I always say constructive challenge. Just saying something is not constructive challenge.
No, you're right. Because if you see a problem, ideally you come up with a solution, no, unless in general.
All the bosses of mine always said, never just say, I don't like it. Always come with an offer, which is, I don't think this is going to work, and here's why. However, if we add this to your proposal, so challenge and build, if the offer is, if we do this, then I can align, and then I think we come to a better. But again, it takes time for, I think as a behavior to get to that constructive challenge kind of behavior, because, it takes an effort as well from somebody who doesn't like something to actually think about it, understand it, and come with a constructive counter proposal rather than just saying, well, it's all a bit shit, which doesn't help.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned, I found it funny that you said that every 5 years or so you look for the next big challenge, basically. I want to hear more about the last big challenge that you took, which is your current role. So you're at Walgreens Boots Alliance, very big company, and then you go and join Avon, which is obviously a company with a very strong brand, great legacy, but obviously had its challenges in the last few years. Very special business model, which there's a question if it will, if it works with these new times. The split of the business between North America and Europe, a big acquisition by Natura of not Europe, international business. Tell us why you joined Avon and how it's going.
Yeah, I think, as I did mention, I don't like to take a job where the brief is like, everything is perfect. Here's a steering wheel, just keep going straight. I mean, that doesn't sound like a lot of fun to me. And so I need a big, hairy challenge, if you want, whether it was, even if I think about Gucci, it was all about creating new cosmetics line from scratch in a not capability area for P&G, and building that from scratch. If it was at WBA, building a CPG business in a retailer, or whether it was then as a CMO, building a whole first-party data ecosystem enabled by a MarTech stack before many companies even thought in that direction, or then now at Avon, which is how do you reinvent a business model ultimately for a direct selling business that it's an amazing company. If you look at the history, I mean, at some point in time they used to own Tiffany's, etc. It's absolutely astonishing when you go through the archives. And an incredibly purposeful business, because I would say there's two reasons why I went there. One is the challenge to turn around a 136-year-old brand, which, by the way, back in 2011, I think they were at their highest point. They were $11 billion business. They were the biggest beauty business in the world, bigger than L'Oreal at the time, bigger than Estée Lauder. So it's a formidable company. But then since then they have been on double-digit decline, I must add, until last year and this year. But
what a coincidence!
Yes. What change? No, I'm joking. I do not have that kind of impact on a business, but there was a few fundamental shifts that we've made that contributed to that. The second reason is actually the incredible purposeful nature of that business. If you think about, so we're B2B2C, so we have about 5 million representatives worldwide, and many of these, so whenever they sell a beauty product, so we sell to them and then they sell on the product to their end customer. But they make anywhere between 20 and 40% commission on that sale. And again, if you think it through those lens, when you sell through a retailer, you give that retailer whatever 50% trade margin, and it goes somewhere into the P&L of that retailer. Whilst in this case, if somebody buys from Avon, they actually give 20 to 40% of that purchase goes to a woman like them. And actually, I still remember when I was considering taking the job, I was talking to somebody, and I said, "Oh yes, thanks to Avon, my mum could divorce my dad." And I said, help me understand. Well, so at the time, actually, she became an Avon representative, got her own income, and could escape quite an abusive relationship. And Avon, way back when, 136, nearly 137 years ago, gave employment opportunities to women. I think that was like 60 odd years before the UN even said that there was equal rights between men and women. Women couldn't vote. Stupid example, women couldn't even stand up at the bar to order a drink. Their husband had to do it for them. Women couldn't open bank accounts, etc. And at that point in time, actually, Avon gave them employment opportunities, gave them independence and whatever have you. And even afterwards, we've given over $1 billion, so not $1 million, but over $1 billion over our lifetime to cancer research, gender-based violence, and so that whole, at some point in time, their slogan was actually the company for women, and that that purposeful nature still permeates to that business. So in a way, if you take that together, kind of my mission was to be part of a team that helps to give this incredibly purposeful business another lease of another 100 years of life. And for that, there was a proper transformation needed, because, if you've been on double-digit decline for a decade, clearly you need to make some radical interventions in your business model. And that's what attracted me to the role, the purposeful nature and the significant turnaround challenge. And a company that was clearly ready to change, because that came through from the conversations I had with them when they Ding Dong Avon called me about this job. But yes,
it's different that they say that they want to change and that they're actually ready to change. There's like a huge difference, isn't there?
There is, yes. I had to pressure test that, and in the end, to their credit and to our credit, I would say as a team, we are changing. We're changing rapidly. Honestly, I've never been in a business that is transforming at the rate that Avon is transforming, both business model, infrastructure, costs, everything. It's incredible.
And we are kind of like in the era of transformation, and it's wonderful really to see companies that kind of like reinvent themselves. They really transform their business. But at the same time, as you said, Avon is a legacy company, one that has a lot of loyal consumers, which is like a base of those big fans that believe in Avon for the purpose, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, like, now you have all these changes happening with Gen Z also entering into the consumer base, and then you have all the fast digitization happening around you, and you're trying to figure out how do we transform, move forward with the business. So how do you navigate this while also staying true to your purpose and not losing touch with that initial and loyal consumer base that you have?
Yeah, for me, it starts with being clear what your brand is about. And actually, I would say that's the first thing I actually did when I arrived at Avon. I spent so much time in the archives. It was even interesting when you looked at the historical advertising, and all of a sudden, in the original advertising, there was always the representative that was there together with the product. And then somewhere in the 70s, 80s, the representative disappeared and it was just product. And actually, if you would put it next to L'Oreal advertising, it would look almost the same. Then even Avon started doing celebrities and, like L'Oreal's territory. And so you almost felt like they lost their identity. And so one of the things, we call it the Avon Trinity, is like what makes Avon special. It's three things. That's why we call it the Trinity. One thing is, of course, great product. We call it aspirational beauty at irresistible value. We actually tested 12 of our, 13, I think, of our top selling products. And we tested them against prestige products, which costed like 3-4 times more, blind tested. So we didn't say people it was Avon. And actually in all but one case, our product came back parity, but again, at a quarter of the price. So that was one element that actually made people feel proud again to work for Avon and the products that we have. The second element of the Trinity was more this community brand, call it beauty from and for the community, because it's sold, to a large extent, particularly in developing markets, still door to door, from woman to woman, etc. So that relationship, that beauty from and for the community is important. But then the unlock, to your point, to the transformation actually came from the third element of the Trinity, which used to be called representative, but actually I kind of repositioned that into high touch beauty advice. Because that's ultimately, what makes a huge difference. And then, of course, across all of that sits our purpose of, progress for women. But around that high-touch beauty advice, that really unlocked the thinking. Because then you can do high-touch beauty advice face-to-face with a representative, but you can also do high-touch beauty advice in a digital environment, etc. And so by just putting that out there and then looking at, starting with the consumer, because that's the first thing, be clear what your brand is about. Secondly, it is then, when you put the consumer at the center, yes, some consumers will want to talk about beauty products and will want to talk with a beauty advisor. Some other people will already know which products they love, to your point, and they don't necessarily want to talk to a beauty advisor. They just want their product next day delivery, and they don't want to create an account because they already have an Amazon Prime account. So they just want to one click and they have the
guilty as charged.
Exactly. And it's lowest possible friction. You need to have a route through that. Sometimes they would say, I don't want to see a person, but actually I wouldn't mind getting some virtual diagnostics. I take a selfie of my skin, get recommended which products would be right, do a virtual try on, and that route needs to be available. And then, ultimately, and we have them already in Turkey, sometimes you just want to browse the products in a store and play with them. And so we have now in Turkey, by the end of the year, we'll have 100 stores. So again, you start having a full omni-channel experience based on the customer. And I think maybe in the past we did not have the customer sufficiently at the core. And I think that's honestly the biggest role that a CMO plays, is putting the customer at the center of the boardroom. So that, because ultimately if you don't win with the customer, and yes, we might be B2B2C, so the representative is very important as well, but if you lose sight of the customer, your business will not win. And I think that's where the customer is now back firmly at the center. And to your point around digitization, because then indeed, once you put the customer at the center, then you say yes, our representatives can sell door to door, but how about, because ultimately they're influencers, how about they do live streaming? So we have a partnership now with Bamboozer. The representative can do a live show around the product and then actually sell and, of course, earn their commission. In Philippines, for example, I was there a few weeks ago. We had this representative. She did a little video on TikTok. And she got 6,000 orders for a body lotion that she was demonstrating. So then she turned up at our factory with a van and said, like, I need 6,000 of these body lotions so I can ship them to my customers. That was on TikTok Shop. So the other one, there's a representative in Italy. Her name is Julia, and she only sells digitally. So she started off with her friends. So she is 18 years old. She studies beauty esthetician. She segmented first her friends in different WhatsApp groups because there were some friends that like lots of color, some friends that like skincare, some like fragrance, whatever. And then basically we have this digital. So we have a digital brochure. So she would just take a product out of the digital brochure, send the link to the WhatsApp group and say, like, I would highly recommend this product. Again, high touch beauty advice. She's making a recommendation. She can even include a little picture on how to use the product or whatever. And then basically then people can just order it, direct delivery to their home, next day delivery. And again, it's a very different way of door-to-door paper catalog selling. And that's where we need to evolve our direct selling model to more of a social selling model, and enable that through technology. And that's exactly what we're doing now. And then, of course, beyond that, for people who do not necessarily want to shop with a representative, we need to have the option like Amazon, and even actually our representative can also open up stores. So the stores I mentioned in Turkey are actually opened up with representatives who say, like, I love this brand. I've been selling it door to door. Actually, I would like to open up a store. And then we enable them, through the right furniture, through the right IT systems, etc., to open up their own franchise and actually sell Avon in the streets or like in a shop, which again helps from a brand reappraisal. So to your point, the moment you put the customer at the center, it just unlocks, and you have a clear positioning on what your brand is. I think it enables significant growth for a brand ultimately.
It feels like almost, if I might say, an intimate route to market or route to consumer, yes. Especially when you have the CMO mentioning some of the sales reps with their first name, yes. And they are on the other side of Europe, right? And one of the buzzwords, let's say, that we have across the CPG industry right now is personalization. Yeah. And I get that Avon, because of where it started, it has that element very strong at its core, especially when it comes to service. But I'm wondering, when it comes to product, do you have any initiatives to get to that point of being even more custom and personalized to the consumer need as well?
Yeah, no, I think, it's a good question. I think clearly, we have quite a broad portfolio. So for now, our focus is mainly on personalization from a product recommendation standpoint. That can come from, call it the analog way, which is a representative based on what they know of the customer recommending the product that is right for them. And then, of course, the other route is more through, AI, where we then, we have a partnership with Perfect Core, for example, who helps us with, virtual try-ons and skin diagnostics to kind of recommend the right regime of skincare products and all those kind of things. Or, fragrance finders, which help you find which fragrance is right for you based on maybe fragrance that you've used in the past, etc. So that we have. For now, we don't have, it's challenging at scale. And, for example, we are still by volume the number one fragrance brand in the world. And so in that sense, it is challenging to do full on personalization on product at scale. Clearly, there is engraving in your bottle for your name or the name of the person who you're giving it to. So all of those things are possible. But, and even if you think about Christmas gifting, for example, at least with us, you don't need to buy the ready-made box sets. Actually, through our representatives, they can mix and match the products that you feel are right to go into the box. So there's that kind of personalization, but we haven't gone all the way, and I know some beauty companies have where, you know, you scan a color and then it creates you a lipstick with that color. It might be something for the future, but for now, you know, we're more focusing at scalable initiatives to really turn around that business in the right way, which, by the way, is happening, and it's not a secret. You can read it in our Q1 annual report on our earnings. You know, beauty is now back in growth. I think in Brazil we were over 6% in growth. In international, we were about 3% in growth. So, you know, the business is reacting positively to a kind of much more focused approach, brand investment, because we hadn't invested in brand for a long time, and then opening up the access to the brand through an omni-channel business model. And it's really good to see, you know, a legacy brand that has been in a bit of trouble to actually start that brand scene coming out on the other way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that's part of like the beauty of it, no? That it's like a legacy brand. You talked about the history of the brand. It's pretty amazing. So apart from that, and Kristof, you must be managing a lot of people in your 3 organizations or 2.5 organizations. Like when you talk to top talent, because obviously you need top talent to be able to drive this, what reasons do you give them to join Avon? Like, why should someone that's doing well in their company, if they're contacted by Avon or somebody representing Avon to join Avon, why should they leave and join Avon right now?
Yeah, I think, you know, I said, you know, people need to be ready for a good challenge. I think, you know, the legacy to leave is, you know, kind of reviving, and I said we're already on that journey now, you know, a legacy brand. So I think that for me is like that challenge. But equally, again, that purposeful nature. I did this McKinsey Marketing Fellowship program, and you know, people, when you talk about what this business does for women on many levels, you know, from an employment opportunity or earnings opportunity, from a development opportunity, from what we do in terms of women-related causes. People go like, oh my God, I wish I was working for such a purposeful business. So for me, that in itself, but then I would say the other bit is, for me, if we truly get this ecosystem properly kind of organized, and we're working with some partners on that from a first party data perspective, this becomes an incredibly powerful opportunity, because we have the data for our representatives. And then we have, because we're direct in a way, we're B2B2C. And again, there's very few companies that have that level of data once we organize this correctly. And that will really empower. It's the power I've seen at WBA as well. And you know, if you think about the other big players, that they're dreaming about having that kind of ecosystem and that kind of. We have 5 million reps, and ultimately they're all influencers or micro-influencers in their own right. So if you truly activate that network of representatives into almost a marketing channel for you, again, I think it just, for me, it's been an enormous learning opportunity because it's such a unique business model that I think creates so many opportunities. So that for me probably would be the main reason, you know, in terms of turning that brand around, incredibly purposeful brand around, you know, a real opportunity on technology and first party data, and you know, and seeing the transformation happen live before my eyes.
Yeah, 5 million people.
It's a small country.
How many companies in the world have 5 million employees? I mean, I know they're not employees in this case, but
yes, well, they're big fans of the brand, right? So it's almost direct access to 5 million influencers who love your brand. You know, so that's it's a unique opportunity. Yes.
Yeah. We have a bit more than 5,000 followers on LinkedIn.
Excellent.
So we're getting there.
If any of them wants to become an Avon representative, they're always welcome.
Well, to any listeners, I'll leave Kristof's LinkedIn profile on the show notes so you can.
And what's interesting, actually, when you look at the reasons why people become Avon representatives, they say clearly there's a bit of earnings. But honestly, it's more like a gig economy job, right? It's like, a little earnings on the side. There's, in developing markets, still quite a few people make a living out of it, but more in Western world, it's more like a gig on the side. We have students doing it on the side, selling to, family, friends, etc. But interestingly, the other reasons for doing it is actually being part of a community, and just that community feel is incredibly strong, and actually ranks very close actually to the earnings opportunity as a reason why women are an Avon rep. Is because they're then part of that network, and you get together as a group of representatives and you talk about your business, your products, your friends, and anything around that. So it was interesting. I was in Brazil a few months ago, and I always do in-home visits because I think it's important that you're in touch with your customer and your representative. And so this was with a representative, and with a translator, etc. And all of a sudden, there's like a guy yelling from the street the name of the representative, and she's like, "I'm busy, leave me alone. I'm doing this interview with this important person from Avon, etc. So I'm busy." And no, I need you now. And then, anyways, the guy comes up and then tells her, I really need my soap now. And she's like, "Why do you need your soap now?" "Well, because, I've been, this is my third date tonight, and tonight is the night, so I need my soap." But again, you can imagine then when this representative goes to the next household, they're like, "Oh, Johnny is third date," But it's like that community linchpin element that I think is incredible. And the representatives, how they kind of have that central point within the community, I think is really inspiring.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Was that in a city or in the country?
In Sao Paulo, yeah.
In Sao Paulo, okay. Great city, by the way. And Kristof, with everything that you've gone through in a good way, and everything you've learned in your career, if you were to speak to yourself at the very beginning of your career, as you were a graduate engineer, knowing what you know now, what would be the one piece of advice you would give yourself?
I think, and I said, for me, I kind of did it. So, but I would probably just encourage me to do it and to do even more of it is, don't box yourself in. I think, I said I've sold sanitary towels, laundry detergents, high-end luxury Gucci products, paracetamol in boots to, now back to beauty products. So, I think, and with very different business models, just CPG, then luxury counter business, then into retail, and then now into direct selling, and, social selling, DTC, everything along the way. I think it's important that you're curious is probably the first thing, is continually learn, be like a sponge. It's probably the most important advice I would give to myself. And within that, don't box yourself into, and that's why I think, jumping a little bit, and sometimes people do stay very long at businesses. And I think I've also stayed usually, for a while because I want to see through what I start. But on the other hand, I think it's important that you smell the world outside, are curious about what's going on beyond your turf of what you're specifically working on. And just continually learn, because I think next to collaboration, I think the second most important skill in leaders is curiosity and learning. And I think sometimes people do not have that reflex. And I think then your career will not go very well, I think.
This was Kristof Neirynck, CMO and General Manager Western Europe at Avon. Christina, was he up to our expectations? I think he was, right?
Oh, absolutely he was. And his journey itself is indeed so inspiring. I love the whole engineer turned to marketeer and then going into commercial part of his profile. He's truly inspiring leader, and I loved when we asked him about it. His response was being humble and, first of all, listening to your organization, not knowing it all from day one. And I think he also made a really good book recommendation, which I will make sure to read, which was From Good to Great by Jim Collins, was it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I really liked his approach to coming in, how he comes into a business as a leader, like with being humble, listening, believing, not just acting, and really getting like aware of what the business is all about and what's happening there. And you probably also see the potential of different people in that process. He didn't mention it. I do think that he is very humble. I think he sells himself short sometimes even, because he does have a lot of gravitas as a leader, right?
But he has his actions to speak for himself, I guess. He's doing a lot. I mean, the whole team clearly in Avon. I was quite interested to hear about how much they have evolved. I had no idea about the strong purpose that sits there behind the brand and how they have been supporting women for over, 130 years?
Yeah.
So it is in their core to be close to that community, and the way they have evolved, perhaps there was a little bit of a longer journey going through celebrities and being more product focused, and now they're trying to find their way back to their roots, which I really loved, because in these days you see this big word of transformation everywhere. And there is a little bit of a reluctancy, I would say, to transform, because you might go further away from what your purpose is. And here we see the complete opposite, transforming to find ourselves back to where we were.
Yeah, and I think that he boiled down something incredibly complicated, because he talked about 5 million reps into he boiled it down to something extremely simple as putting the consumer in the middle while respecting the business model of reps, right? So really about being omni without compromising reps through empowering them through like social selling or setting up their own stores. I thought that was pretty fascinating.
It is pretty fascinating. And as I think I mentioned it also throughout our conversation at some point, that I saw a leader who can also mention some of those 5 million sales reps by name. I mean, he's really close to that model. And I think this shows on the results that the business has clearly turned around, as well as the way they have chosen to transform. Yeah,
it also talks about him as a leader, but also as someone that's able to really adapt to environments, because he'd never been in a rep structure, which is very special. And he seems like he's been there all his life, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Christina, for your conclusions as always. Thanks to our listeners also for tuning in. I'm sure you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did. So stay tuned for another episode next Wednesday. Have a great day.